Now, talking about her character, let's talk about the common characteristics of her hymns. We talked about her life and her production, but how would you describe these?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of hymns, so it's kind of hard to really characterize them all as being the same thing. But after typing up all of them, I just started to notice a few patterns. A lot of them are written in the first person, kind of like Gerhard and the writers of 17th century Germany. Instead of being more of a corporate we type of hymn, it's more of an I type of hymn. She uses very dogmatic language, often with biblical references. It's interesting, but for most people, I think you'd have to look it up and figure out to what she is referring for a lot of it. A lot of things in her hymns, I think, are just characteristics of Lutheran hymns in general, where instead of maybe having one theme throughout the entire hymn, she'll describe the plan of salvation in the hymn. Law and gospel, the forgiveness of sins, it's kind of always central. And not only just kind of talk about faith and talk about God and different things, but also describe how we know Christ and how we come to faith through the means of grace. So Lutheran hymns always make sure they point out word and sacrament as the means where you see Jesus and know him. And I think that's how she connects the ideas in the lessons with our life today, I guess, in the modern Lutheran church. You know, she'll say, well, we see Jesus just as they did through word and sacrament. And yeah, I really enjoy how she connects those ideas like you would in a sermon, I guess. And then another thing that all Lutheran hymns seem to do is they end in heaven. They always point to the eternal. They point to where we're going someday. And at the end of every hymn, or almost every hymn, she always says what the end goal of salvation is, ultimately being in heaven and seeing God face to face, and what we're looking forward to, I guess, why we go through all the trials in this life. Other themes, I guess. She has a lot of special occasion types of hymns. Some of them are for like the Reformation anniversary. There's one about the Diet of Worms anniversary in 1918. Another about city missions, things related to her interest in, it would be Lutheran institutional mission in Milwaukee, her work and involvement in that. And interestingly enough, she does have a hymn about the WLS campus. So in 1929, actually, when the campus was dedicated, she wrote a poem about it. And I think she might make reference to it being like the Wartburg or something. I'd have to look it up. But just I can speak to that. It was designed to mimic that. So that's fascinating that she... Because everyone wants to feel like Luther in his study in Germany. I suppose it's probably more inspiring or something to study when you feel like you're up in Wartburg.
No, that's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I think it reflects the Lutheran academic tradition too, right? Of that.
So yeah, she wrote, I think, a couple of hymns about the Synodical Conference. There's really something for every topic and every occasion in there. Weddings, anniversaries of churches, about baptism and Holy Communion, the means of grace, every Sunday in the church year, and other things too. And then in terms of German translation, she kind of picked the hymns that she liked and probably grew up singing from the Evangelische Lutherische Gesangbuch, and then kind of made sure that they were in English somewhere in the Wisconsin Synod as they started transitioning in their hymnals to English.
So all those things that you mentioned, especially the focus on Christ, heaven, forgiveness, means of grace, all that stuff, those are good characteristics for hymns. There's one thing that stood out to me was you maybe have to look up her references. That maybe seems like a slight weakness to those hymns. Were there any other weaknesses that you noticed, or is that pretty much the major one?
Well, I mean, some of the meters, I think people would say, are kind of unwieldy. They might need a good tune, I think, to help them sing a little better, but there are a lot of them that go with a recognizable German Lutheran tune. And if you were reading through them, I kind of wonder if maybe you picked that up too. She's kind of thinking of a Lutheran hymn that already exists in her head and is kind of patterning it around that meter. But some of them are kind of long and unwieldy, and the poems themselves are kind of long. So that might be a weakness. Another weakness might be just the language being more like King James Version language. And I think that now, as people are making hymnals and they're emphasizing modern language and all of that, they want something that is more EHV or New King James Version or something. So I think that today people might call that a weakness, but in some hymns it's stronger than others, and it might not bother people so much, but it is kind of in an older, more archaic form of English.
Yeah, and I probably didn't strike people as out of place back then so much. If they were speaking English, I'm sure they were using the King James Version, so it probably fit in nicely.
Yeah. Well, and like their other hymns, I think also kind of fit that. So.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that about the hymns. We've talked a bit about her influence, the Augustana Synod, and got into that. But she was always a member of the Wisconsin Synod, I understand, and therefore was connected to that synod and then its larger association, the Synodical Conference. Mm-hmm. What impact did she have on these Lutherans?
She had a great impact on the other Lutherans in the Synodical Conference, as well as in the Wisconsin Synod. And I think that in her circle, in the Wisconsin Synod and in that area, I think that she might have been maybe like less recognized than she was outside, where they were reading other periodicals and things where her writing was. I think that they probably appreciated her, but it was maybe kind of on a more limited level. In the Augustana Synod, I think they had a stronger appreciation for her, and they maybe saw her as more of a professional and an academic and translator and everything that she was. Yeah. In the Synodical Conference, the Lutheran Witness does reprint a lot of her poems. It's evident that she knows the editor of the Lutheran Witness and its other publications well. And they're all kind of familiar with her work and appreciate her. And the interesting thing is that when the Lutheran hymnal actually rolls around with the Synodical Conference and all of that, what happens is she ends up suggesting, I think, a lot of hymns to them and is cognizant of what they're doing, and also kind of gets involved in submitting some hymns to be reviewed by them, but is not really ultimately included in that work. So I think that she might kind of have a stronger presence in Synodical Conference hymnology, in that she was kind of working behind the scenes for the Lutheran hymnal, but what actually ended up showing up in their work was maybe not just very representative of all that she did kind of for them.
Yeah, did she have any personal hymns that appeared in the Lutheran hymnal?
She had two of them. So one of them is number 419, For Jerusalem Thou Weepest. That's the Trinity 10 hymn. And then there is one German translation, which is This Night of Wondrous Revelation. But I've actually looked through the minutes for TLH, and it looks like originally there were about three that might have been like originally slated for inclusion and then cut out. So there is one that she said she had been asked to translate, but they didn't end up using that one. And then there were two other hymns from Songs of the Church here, I think, that were mentioned by name that ended up not making it in. And I don't exactly know what the story was there, but it looks like overall with the Lutheran Hymnal Project, Polak, of course, W.G. Polak, who kind of ran the show, was Missouri Synod. And he, of course, knew about August Kroll's hymns, August Kroll being an English Synod president and Missouri Synod translator. And they also respected the work of Catherine Winkworth, who was living in Victorian England, but a well-known translator of Gerhardt's hymns. So what ended up happening, I think, was just that they favored the two of them and kind of combining those two in their translations just over hers. And the Wisconsin Synod maybe didn't have as much of a say, I think, in the project. I don't exactly know what happened, but it's kind of telling from the minutes that the Wisconsin Synod was so quiet, and you have the Missouri Synod people, or mostly Polak, kind of taking charge of the project.
Yeah, I think that was covered a bit in Mark Brown's Tale of Two Synods, just kind of the dynamics between those relationships. I don't know if he got into the hymnal project.
I've actually been reading that book. Yeah.
Well, that would be a whole nother topic, just the production of the Lutheran hymnal. I don't know if there's been much written on that, but that would be.
There hasn't, but I'm thinking about doing something with that. So,
right.
Yeah, should keep that under wraps.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably one of the best placed people if you're the one who's already dug into the minutes. So, yeah, that would be interesting to see. Well, let's take a step back then. Basically, it seems to me, and tell me if this is a fair impression, it seems to me that she kind of carried more weight within the Augustana Synod than within the Wisconsin Synod or within the Synodical Conference in general. Is that a fair takeaway? Or
I think so, but I don't exactly know why, I guess, and you can only really speculate and go by the evidence you have. But I think that it might just be a case of the people that are directly around you sometimes don't always appreciate you until, like a generation later, and until they take a step back. So I think they probably liked her and they enjoyed having her around at church and things, but they might not have seen her as being like a professional hymn writer and translator. They might have just thought she was the girl next door, the person in the desk next to them at work. And yeah, I don't really know what they were thinking, but it seems to kind of be that way. The people kind of in your hometown just think of you as, being the person next door, and maybe not, recognized on the national level like she was.
Yeah. Do you have any other theories why she wasn't more recognized or used as a translator or writer of hymns?
Well, in the book, one of the theories I bring up is just that they were uncomfortable with her being a woman. And I don't really know if that was a thing or if that would have really played that much of a difference. I think that they respected her a lot and they appreciated her as a writer. I don't know if that would be the reason why. It might have just been that the Wisconsin Synod was a little more reluctant to put themselves out there with a unique project than the Augustana Synod was. I don't know if you get this sense too. This is just my impression of Synodical Conference in the early 20th century. So the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod has a lot of individuals that are all very competent and, kind of willing to do their own thing, but they, form alliances and get the job done. But in the Wisconsin Synod, at least around that time, it's kind of more about groupthink, where they don't really raise their hand and say, hey, I have this idea, you should all go along with it. They kind of wait and follow a little bit. And that's just the impression that I get. After the split, I think that they kind of develop their own voice and take on new projects. But for this time, they're kind of followers, and that might have been why. So that's my most plausible theory. I don't really know about the others that I bring up in the book, but it might have just been, it was on the back burner.
Yeah. Well, yeah, very interesting theories, and I think there's something there in what you're suggesting. Another podcast episode we had Pastor Ben Schaefer talking about the 19th Amendment and women getting the vote and how that impacted the Synodical Conference. So I think that'd be a good crossover episode to reference at least kind of the same exact setting and a very similar topic.
Yeah, I mean, I listened to that too. And I mean, I think that there's kind of something there definitely where they, we're also thinking about how they saw women in the church, and how do we feel about women writers and things like that too. And it's interesting to think about, because the Lutheran Church has always had female hymn writers, starting with Elisabeth Urtel. And it's something that I enjoy thinking about, and just exploring how they responded to that. So it would be interesting to talk to him and kind of see what he's discovered about that, or if he had run into any of Anna Hoppe's works or hymns or things.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap up the kind of the content discussion here. Does Anna Hoppe have a tangible legacy today?
Well, she has a tangible legacy in that she is represented in the hymnals of the former Synodical Conference, but it's only about one hymn per hymnal. Basically, there's one in Christian Worship 1993 and called Rise, Arise. There's one in Lutheran Service Book, the Missouri Synod hymnal. That's O Son of God in Galilee. There are none in the ELCA hymnal. There's none in the ELS hymnal, but I'm going to make sure that it's changed when I help with the supplement. And then I think there's one in the Association of Free Lutheran Churches hymnal. So they're out there, and people are finding these translations and things, but it's really just kind of random and limited. So she didn't have any descendants, of course, being single and unmarried. So there isn't anyone in her family legacy to really carry that on. I'm kind of the only person that has done any research or written about her. So it's just interesting. So I think that it is kind of out there, but people have yet to really let it resurface and talk about it.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you think her works should be revitalized and used more. You kind of made that pretty clear. You're going to, as best you can, make sure that does happen. Are there any challenges to making her hymns work today, or are there things that would make it easier to use them?
Well, there were a few things that I mentioned before that are challenges. I think like the King James language is one of them. The meters, like I think that maybe some newly composed tunes might be able to help out with reviving them. Before this, there wasn't really an established collection of hymns where you could find them aside from this out of print book, Songs of the Church Year, aside from going to the Northwestern Lutheran and digging through all of them and looking at basically the title page of each issue and finding the hymns. They were hard to find before this. So I've put together a document, which I think I should make into a Kindle book, where people can find the hymns easily. And it's easy to print something in the bulletin and just, throw it out there for people to use. So I think that there are some measures like that to mitigate, but I've kind of done what I can with compiling and re-editing the work. And
now that we're going on to the next section, then we're talking about the workload, and it seems like that probably took a lot of work to put all those hymns together from all those various sources.
You have no idea.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, but I can imagine it probably was a lot of work. So can you tell us a bit more about how you went about writing on this topic, and maybe even before that, what your research method was like?
Yeah, well, I learned that when you're the first person to write about a topic, and you don't know if there are any sources out there, you have to turn to unconventional methods to get your information. And that was kind of the whole theme of how I did this project. So like I said, I got the email from my professor, and right away I was curious, and I thought, well, I want to find out more about this person. So I did some internet searches, and you can easily do an internet search on Anna Hoppe and find her birth and death date, and that she lived in Milwaukee, but there aren't any other sources with further information. That's really all they say. And then maybe some have Ernest Edwin Ryden's biography of her. But yeah, so all of these sources out there mention her and know about her, but it's a very limited amount of information. So I did digging, and I thought, well, this is kind of funny. There aren't any further sources on this. Am I going to find anything to do this for my thesis? And then I started emailing people, professors that I knew of American church history and church music. And I just said, hi, I'm Elisabeth. I'm a student. I like to do my thesis on hymn writer Anna Hoppe. She lived at this time, she was in Milwaukee. And they'd all say, oh, sure. Yeah, well, we know about her, but we don't know anything about her, actually. So it would be interesting if you did a paper. Please let us know what you find out. And I thought, okay, well, so if they don't know anything about her, is there anything out there about her to research? And that was kind of the ongoing problem. I did a lot of searches, and I used Google Books to find some of the initial sources, books.google.com. I just typed in Anna Hoppe parentheses, Northwestern Lutheran parentheses, and then tried to figure out what I could find. And then I'd find a couple of things in an article, and I'd think, okay, I'm going to search this person's name now and find out what his connection is to Anna Hoppe. And it was really just this random process of trial and error, which I don't normally like and not normally want to use, but I ended up doing. I did genealogy websites, and I found basic records. It's easy if you just get the trial for 14 days and then get everything you need and switch to the other one. Then I also got the collection from the Milwaukee County Historical Society about her. There are about 30 items of random things that they have. I don't know how that got there. I don't know why the Wells Historical Institute doesn't have anything, but
Yeah, that's
they
an interesting.
have a collection. Yeah, I did contact them though, and I said, well, Anna Hoppe is a significant Wells historical member. Do you have anything at the Institute? And they said, no, we don't.
Yeah.
Or I mean, it might be in some other pastor's collection or something, but yeah, it was really strange. I also did a lot of my research at MLC in the library because they have all the Northwestern Lutherans. So I knew I had to get the hymns, and I knew I had to page through all of the Northwestern Lutherans looking for hymns. So what I did was, because 35 minutes away is not too far to drive from Bethany, I drove over to MLC on weekends, and I went into the basement and took out all of the Northwestern Lutherans one at a time, and just paged through every single page of them until I found something. So a lot of the hymns are on the cover, so those weren't too hard to find. But if I didn't see one on the cover, I'd go ahead and page through the rest of the issue to see if there was anything. So that took a long time. I took pictures on my phone. I took a lot of photocopies. I spent many long days over there doing research downstairs. And yeah, it wasn't until years later I found out that the seminary had actually scanned all of them, where I could have just gone and downloaded them instead of, spending all that time in the basement. But oh well, it got done. But so I did that just by searching and kind of doing all the difficult work myself. So it was really just trial and error, and I guess just slowly putting the pieces of the puzzle together in chronological order, and just seeing what would happen. And yeah, it took just months of, I think, kind of looking at all the different pieces I had and trying to form a story out of it for it to actually work. I mean, anybody can go and look up just the archival records and, different things that you could find in the Northwestern Lutheran, but it takes a historian to kind of interpret it and to make a story out of all those different pieces. So that was my challenge. I had all these different things kind of sitting in front of me that I had dug out and found, and I wanted to string them together somehow to be a complete story. So I did end up finding things, and people thought that there were no sources. So I kind of see that as a success, but it was a lot of work, and I made it, I guess.
Yeah, you're kind of sitting on the opposite end of someone who wants to write on, say, like Martin Luther, right? Where there's so many toes you don't want to step on because someone else has done the research, or you have to be original, but also incorporate other people's research. And there's just so much primary source material. You had the opposite where, it was a challenge to gather and find all that stuff, but it's kind of nice because, I don't know, it's kind of like an empty sandbox, and you get to play all by yourself and make your own masterpiece without any interference, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think otherwise, plagiarism is a concern, and, doing the same theme or same topic as other people. But I mean, I was really the only person writing about this, and not even my committee really knew what I was going to find or anything about her. So I kind of felt like with the work, I had to really show people who she was, just because there's nothing that is out there really extensive about her.
Did anyone find really surprise or excite you as you're doing your research?
Well, any day I found something by her and her name popped up on one of the printed pages, it was just like Christmas. I was like, oh, I found an article today. And, it was just really exciting. But there's one day when I decided to go to Gustavus, also not very far away from where I was living, and page through all of the Lutheran companion issues. Those are their periodical for the Augustana Synod. And I thought, I'm probably not going to find anything today, but I'm going to page through all of these and just see if I find any hymns or anything interesting. And so I paged through this, really thick book of old newspapers. And I turned the page and I found an autobiographical article by her with her picture. Wow. And I was just like, there it is. And, I was so excited because I didn't know if I would ever find anything that was by her, about her life or her childhood. So yeah, I was in the library, but I'm pretty sure I vocalized something, but it was just a good day. And then that kind of structured my whole paper. I kind of quoted that article that I found throughout the book. So I think just the joy of wanting to find something and then finally finding it and just unexpectedly, finding exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, I always like those stories because, anyone who's done research has had those days where, like you said, it's like Christmas, you find that one or two things now just about your writing style, it's a well-organized book with the narrative and then analyzing her work. I notice you like to rely on lengthy block quotes of primary sources. Was there anything that led you to decide to incorporate so much of the primary material directly into your work?
Well, I probably wouldn't do that today. But I think that, again, thinking about it being the only book out there on her, I kind of felt like I had to bring as much as I could into the work to kind of introduce people to her. All the sources that I found were very vague and distant and kind of far removed from her. And I really wanted her to kind of speak for herself and have people kind of get to know what she was like. Just because I think I saw that as a glaring deficiency that I wanted to counteract. But I don't know that I would do the same thing today, but that's just because my book is out there where those sources are. But I wanted them to be out there just where people could at least find them or look at them, because there are no other places where people can find some of those works. But another thing, just I think with the nature of the topic, like if someone is doing a historical article or an MDiv thesis on like Martin Luther, you probably wouldn't start out the article by saying, well, Martin Luther was born November 10th, 1483. This is where he was born. By the way, he spoke German. He was from Germany. You wouldn't like go into this discursive annotation of his whole life. You'd probably just say, well, my research is going to focus on this small aspect of his theology. We're just going to talk about this today. And you guys all know who Martin Luther is, but in my case, my audience didn't even know really who she was. So I felt like I really had to do kind of everything to show who she was and what her writing style was like and what she all did. And again, the lack of sources was something that I struggled with the whole project.
Yeah, I have to admit, as I was reading it, I was thinking, as I going through all those quotes, I'm like, well, I'm kind of losing the author's voice here. But then I realized I was thinking more of a writer more than a reader, because then when I kind of switched gears and I started just reading it for the sake of what was there, I thought, well, I hear Anna Hoppe's voice, and that in and of itself was, I thought this is kind of a hidden gem. That's kind of what hooked me on your topic. Was the more I got to hear of her, was, wow, this is a very interesting woman. And you kind of let her speak for herself. And so I did appreciate that in many places where you chose to kind of let her speak. So
Yeah.
That's my feedback on
some
that.
of the work of historians is sometimes just compiling sources and putting them together for people to read. And so I still felt like that was kind of a valuable part of the book. I do kind of cringe when I think about just kind of throwing all those things together and not really talking, I guess, for a while, just having so many blocked quotes. But I sometimes also think that if you put things like in a reference or in an endnote, people won't always look it up and read it for themselves. They'll just kind of say, yeah, I'll do that later, and then they don't. But if you put it in front of people, then you know that there is a chance of them reading it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's just why I did what I did. But I might do things differently next time. And with my article that's coming up, I think I will do something a little more reserved. So
yeah. Well, no real criticism here. Just making observations.
There are flaws in my writing. I do admit. So.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. And
I have my own style.
Any writer will look at that. So yeah, absolutely not a bad thing. So let's go to the final section of our podcast here. We just kind of talk about more of your personal relationship with this project and anything else you want to have within Lutheran history. So do you have any unanswered questions about your own topic?
I have a lot of unanswered questions. It's basically one big unanswered question, the whole topic. I mean, I feel like I could be disproven at any time about some of the things I've found because I don't really have a lot of primary sources or accounts from her. So I don't really know what happened to her family. I don't know who she all knew in 20th century Lutheranism. Kind of the extent of her influence is still kind of an unknown. I don't really know what happened with the Augustana hymnal and how her hymns got selected. I don't exactly know why her hymns weren't used in TLH or what went on behind the scenes. Something I'm kind of digging into as we speak. Even what she was actually doing for work. I also found letters where she said she moved to Chicago. And I don't know what she was doing there, but, maybe, the whole secretary thing was just kind of an elaborate cover up for whatever she was really doing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that possibility out there, but yeah, so I don't exactly know everything about her just because there aren't a lot of primary sources, but it's still very much a work in progress. And the book is just kind of one manifestation of the entire project that I'm still doing. So
do you think there are more areas of potential research on a Hoppe?
It's possible, but I don't really know what someone else would do that I haven't covered.
Yeah, it sounds like you're pretty exhaustive in your research. It seems like.
Yeah, I feel like they'd have to look at my book and then, find something that I didn't find with my book and, fit that in somehow. But I think that one thing, I guess, that could be kind of unexplored would be the relation to the Lutheran hymnal and all of the influence that she had on the pastors that were on the committee for that. So that might be something I will be looking into in the near future. We'll see.
All right. So you kind of alluded to some of it, but what upcoming projects do you have within Lutheran history?
Well, I am writing an article about her with some of the updates that I found in the past few years, and it'll be out sometime this fall in the Wells Historical Institute Journal. I don't know when that usually comes out, the fall issue, but I'm putting the finishing touches on the article as we speak. And I'm also, as a PhD student, involved in my exams right now. So that's taken up most of my time with reading and taking notes and preparing for all of that, but also kind of in a related field on Lutheran history. And then I'll be looking ahead over the next few years at my dissertation. And we'll see if I have a topic that is kind of related to this or where I can kind of bring in some of my research and interest with all of this. And we'll really see how that goes. I don't even know what this will all be like the next few years, but I'm just kind of focusing on getting school done for now and then writing more after the dissertation is done.
Yeah, a lot of work ahead of you there. So final question then. So what would you like to see more research and writing done on within Lutheran history?
Well, In general, I think that there are a lot of people that are covering both Missouri Synod and Wisconsin Synod history with German background. Like the Wisconsin Synod is covering their history, the Missouri Synod Lutherans are covering their history, and there, is a good foundation for both of those things. But with Scandinavian Lutheranism, because there are all of these different traditions that have merged into the current ELCA, there is a very limited amount of research that people really spend investigating those different traditions, like the Augustana Synod and some of the Eastern Lutheran Synods and all of those. I mean, the ELCA just has so much ground to cover that they don't get to all of it. Mm-hmm. So I think that it would be of value to kind of look into some of those things that no one else is researching on that side of things. I also just think, being a church musician and a student of theology and a historian, I think that we need more people that can do all three of those things, because there are church historians that don't know a lot about music. There are music historians that don't know a lot about theology and all of those things. And it's nice to have all of those different disciplines combined together, where you can research hymnody and understand all those different angles. So if someone is, I guess, doing two of those three things, music, theology, or history, I'd encourage them to do the third thing and kind of put it all together with musicology and hymnology and all of that. So,
yeah, well, sounds like you are kind of fulfilling your own wishes there, at least in what you're studying and putting out. So,
well, I'm not trying to say there should be more people like me, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of singular in my field right now, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we'll be looking forward to see what you come up with over the next upcoming years. So, all right. Well, thank you, Elisabeth, for your time today.
Thank you.
All right. For any of our listeners on the Lutheran History Podcast, you can expect to hear more on Lutheran history in 15 days or so.
Are you the kind of person who likes to accomplish more than one thing at once? Then you'll probably be interested in checking out the Lutheran History Shop. By purchasing something from our store, you can support the show, get something for yourself, or get a head start on your Christmas shopping and get something unique for that Lutheran history lover in your life. At the bottom of each episode description, you will find a link to the Lutheran History Shop. There you can browse an assortment of Lutheran history gear and bling, anything from stickers, mugs, pint glasses, water bottles, and totes. There are also many shirts and hoodies that come in dozens of sizes and color options, so you can customize your favorite design. So whether you're looking for a figure from Lutheran history or simply want to display your love for Lutheran history, you'll find what you're looking for at the Lutheran History Shop.